Recording in progress.
All right. We're going to call to order City of Sherwood Planning Commission meeting for May 9th, 2023. Roll call.
Chair Simpson,
Here.
Vice Chair Wydola,
Present.
Commissioner Vance,
Here.
Commissioner Kai,
Here.
Commissioner Capco, here. Commissioner Montalvo, here. And looks like Commissioner Barnes will be absent, and Councilor Dan Stanky's here. I just said here for you.
Welcome. All right. Well, the consent agenda doesn't have anything listed, so we can roll right into council liaison announcements. Councilor Stanky.
Good evening, Chair Simpson and Commissioners. The council recently has been drafting its own version of city policy for HB 3115, the homeless camping. We have another work session scheduled for the next city council meeting because we still do not have the right mapping figured out for that for our city. We want it to be compassionate, respectful, but at the same time responsible for the city. And the map that we sent to staff doesn't quite meet what we're wanting at this point. So we're still ironing that out. But that is, the policy is kind of due July 1st. So we're running against the clock here at the end. And then the other thing is food cart code / policy. We're trying to figure out what makes sense for Sherwood as far as having food carts here. We've had a lot of citizen comment about where are they and when are we getting them. And so we are working on that. Those are the two things.
That's a good question on the homeless camping. Does your policy incorporate buffering, screening, setbacks, or is that going to come to us as a code action item where we would amend the code?
As far as I understand it, we are the ones setting the policy for that right now, and it is up to the city council to determine that.
So it won't have buffering, screening.
So it's not a land use matter, so it's not going to be part of the development code. So planning commission won't see this policy. City council will be setting this policy.
Correct.
And
Yes.
so if a development comes in that contains large numbers of accommodations like the pallet homes, are those considered a development application?
So this
or
is
a policy
the
statement?
policy that council is working on for this House bill is directed towards camping on public properties,
Okay.
not development related per se.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short story, I guess, is there's been a few different federal cases, one at the Supreme Court, that the Oregon legislators then codified in Oregon state law, basically saying cities can't make it illegal to be homeless, that if we don't have a bed for homeless individuals, that we have to allow them to camp on public property somewhere. And so this is a code update to determine where on public property, if we don't have another bed for them, they can go and camp. And so it'd be, right now it's looking like just the hours of 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. And we're trying to figure out exactly which property, they could go to. But I think it's worth noting, we don't really have a homeless issue in Sherwood right now. And so this is really just an update to comply with the state law. And so the analysis that we're doing is trying to figure out, where's the best location given all of the different considerations, schools, residential areas, parks. And so that's the process that city council is going through right now. But yeah, this is another requirement from the state that cities have to go through.
Right. I appreciate you taking the time to explain that. I had just, through an associate, had heard of a development that was occurring that included pallet residences, and I didn't know if that would be considered a development that would have
A development like that would definitely have setbacks and development standards per our code.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that we can't, again, if we don't have a bed
Right.
for them. They have to be able to sleep somewhere between, at reasonable times. And so that would be the nature of this location.
Okay, and that helps me differentiate between something being built and a large-scale development.
And our standards
occurring.
would kick in. I'd say that the type of development that you're thinking of, our code wouldn't allow that on private property right now. I mean, there's code standards that would kick in for that, and it wouldn't be possible. So
Okay.
under the current code, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, could I ask
Yeah.
one question? The site selection, is there going to be public notice, or is there any element of a public process in the policy development?
As of right now, there is not. City Council is just the only policy making on this. Yeah. We have heard from citizens, but there has not been an open forum per se for that. And really what the bill that was passed by the legislator, it was very vague. And so each city is trying to figure out what it really means for their city. And unfortunately, Washington County, all the cities have different interpretations of it. And so we're trying to partner with some of our adjacent cities so that we have somewhat of a unified, so there's not just a place where people are going and not going. But yeah.
Ultimately, it would probably change language in the city's municipal code that falls outside of Chapter 16, which is the development code. So there will be a public hearings process in the future, and at that time, public testimony would be taken on the subject matter.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the
You're
update. All right. Staff announcements. Erica?
Yes,
All
good
right.
evening. So I have a couple of staff announcements here. This Thursday is the last Sherwood West Community Advisory Committee meeting. It will be held at 5:30 in this room. Folks can either testify in person or in writing or online via Zoom if they send me an email stating that they would like that link 24 hours prior to that meeting time. Next Tuesday, we have a joint City Council and Planning Commission work session. The item, the Sherwood West Concept Plan, is the second item on that work session agenda. So we are going to be starting at 5:45 next Tuesday evening. For that item, dinner will start at 5 o'clock. So if you would like dinner, please be here at 5. And if you will be here at 5, could I get a hand? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I just want to make sure that we have enough dinner planned for everyone that evening. So thank you. I think that's it. Oh,
What?
yes.
What?
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
new mystery.
I am so bad. I'm saving the best for last. What are you talking about? Commissioners, I want to introduce you to our newest associate planner, Hugo Hamblin Augusto. If you want to say a couple words about maybe where you came from and why you're so excited about planning here in Sherwood.
And
Put him on the spot.
you have to hold it for.
Hi, Commissioners.
And you can
My
let it
name
go
is
now.
Hugo Augusto. I am from Grants Pass, Oregon, so a similar sized city compared to Sherwood. Portland
let
State
go.
University. Oh, you got to let it go. Okay.
You have to hold it for like 3 seconds to turn it on.
Yeah. So I went to Portland State University. I got a master's in urban and regional planning, and I have a master's in real estate development, kind of mainly on the financial side. I kind of am really excited to be here just because I really love kind of like the Sherwood vibe, the Sherwood history. I kind of went into a deep dive during the interview process, and I'm just super excited to be here and join you guys.
Excellent.
And we're super excited to have him on board.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome. We're a great group, just have to say. And we're humble and funny, right? Community Community comments are limited to those items not already on the agenda. Erica, did anybody sign up to participate this evening?
We have none.
And we have no one in the audience, so we're going to move right into our public hearing. The public hearing on the Development Code Update Case File LU 2023-007PA is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to testify and provide information to the Planning Commission concerning the Economic Opportunities Update Case File LU 2023-007PA. The Commission will conduct tonight's hearing in the following order. Staff will present the staff report, followed by questions, if any, by the Commission for the staff. We'll then open the hearing for public testimony. Each person's time will be limited as followed. The applicant, which is the city, 30 minutes, split between presentation and rebuttal. Persons in favor of the application, 4 minutes. Persons opposed to the application, 4 minutes. Rebuttal from the applicant is the remainder of their 30 minutes. We'll then close the public hearing. Final comments by staff, questions of staff, if any, by the Commission, discussion and deliberation by the Commission. A recommendation to City Council may be made at the close of this hearing, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain. If the matter is continued to a certain date, this will be the only notice of that date you receive. Staff did not receive any notification 24 hours in advance from anyone wanting to provide testimony virtually. Wow, this went on a lot longer. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the blue testimony forms and submit to the planning staff. In reaching a decision in the application, the Commission must consider whether the application meets the relevant approval criteria in the city's land use regulations. Those criteria are identified in the staff report. Staff report is available online and at City Hall. Staff report was accessible to the public 7 days prior to this meeting. The testimony and evidence must address these criteria or other criteria you believe to apply to the decision. Please note, failure to raise an issue without enough detail to enable the Commission, the applicant, and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to City Council, but it goes to the Land Use Board of Appeals, or the Land Use Board of Appeals. Also, failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues regarding proposed conditions of approval. I think that paragraph should be stricken. Without enough detail to allow the Commission to respond to the issue, please in action for damages in Circuit Court. This evening, the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to City Council. The Council is the final decision maker on legislative hearing matters. A tentative Council public hearing date on this matter is scheduled for June 6th. So we have an opportunity to take the staff and applicant testimony and continue if we need further information until the next meeting and still meet the June 6th deadline, correct?
Correct.
All right. I will now turn to staff to present the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Erica Palmer, Planning Manager. Tonight, we're going to hear about the Economic Opportunities Analysis Update, Land Use Case File LU 2023-007PA. So we're going to review the draft refinement tonight, just go over kind of the state land use goal 9, economic development. I'll briefly discuss what's changed from the 2021 EOA, and that includes the employment and land forecast, our buildable lands inventory, and some of the conclusions in the document. And the Commission will make a recommendation to Council to approve with modifications, or deny the adoption of the EOA update, and this is a Type 5 application. So with that, what is Goal 9? So Goal 9 is the state land use goal. And it's the goal for economic development. The state requires cities and counties to go through an economic opportunities analysis to really identify the future of employment growth within the community, what the economic trends are, kind of the target industries that communities want within their community for jobs. And then we do a buildable lands inventory and look at the land needs for future employment growth, to make sure that we have a land base for the economic development growth within our planning period, which is a 20-year planning period. Oh, I just kind of summed up this slide all by myself on the last slide. So the EOA, we We look at the forecasted economic trends. We identify local economic goals for those target job industries. Then we do a land inventory. And then we formulate any new policies and action items. And I just want to take a step back that when we adopted the last EOA, we also adopted our comprehensive plan at that time. So we have goals and policies in our current comprehensive plan, and with this update, we don't need to refine any of those goals and policies in that plan. So what is being reviewed in this EOA update? We're looking at our economic trends again, some of the target industries that the city is wanting to target. We look at the employment land needs, so we examine the demand for jobs and then the land base for those jobs by sector. And then we did a BLI, and then we kind of reconcile those two numbers, making sure that we have the land base for our employment growth for the community. And we look at the employment growth kind of on some different time frames. We look at the short term, which is the 5-year horizon, and then we look at the 20-year horizon for job growth. So I'm not going to go into detail on all of these economic trends that we looked at. They're in the EOA refinement document itself, but we looked at the gross domestic product. We looked at the growth of online shopping and the implications of online shopping and what it does for the marketplace. And then we looked at the increased automation within employment sectors. And if you have any questions about any of that, after the end of the presentation, I can actually go into detail. But regionally, the metro area has outperformed the nation, and the state of Oregon has had really strong growth in construction, professional and business services, and manufacturing, which are all our major drivers of industrial land development. In Washington County, the county itself has seen robust employment growth and remains consistent. Here in Sherwood, the city has outperformed Washington counties in terms of growth over the last decade. Employment growth here in Sherwood, we grew at an average rate of 3.8 from 2010 through 2019, so that was prior to the pandemic. We don't have the pandemic numbers. The 2020 numbers aren't out yet, but we do know that we grew at a pretty steady rate over the prior 10 years. So we grew in retail trade, construction, hospitality and accommodation, and food services and healthcare. We know that employee wages are lower in Sherwood than in the county, and that could possibly mean that we have a younger workforce. So I want to say employee wages, that is not the median household income for Sherwood residents. Those are two different things. And then we see that more residents commute out of Sherwood for work. And those residents commute to, Portland, Hillsborough, Tualatin, and Tigard, and some other communities throughout the metro region. And part of the reason why we are doing this refinement to our EOA is because our council has really recognizes the need for economic development here in Sherwood, and that we need a better housing to employment balance to really create a diversified tax base for the community. And I know that we had some questions about the jobs to housing ratio within our last work session. So I just kind of want to touch a little bit on those numbers. Excuse me. So this table is actually in the EOA. So since we have a lot of people who live here in Sherwood commuting outside of Sherwood for work, Sherwood is really considered a bedroom community. We're a net exporter of labor. In order to kind of balance our housing to jobs ratio in Sherwood now, we would need to accommodate at least an additional 3,000 jobs to have that balance work out. Excuse me. I'm good, I think. So we took a look around the metro region, and we wanted to look at cities with greater employment workforce and the ratios that they bring in per capita for their tax revenues. And we can see here from these charts that cities with greater employment to workforce ratios have higher capita tax revenues coming in for their overall budgets. And we know that jurisdictional service costs are generally higher for residential uses relative to their tax contributions. And I know we touched a little bit about that within our last work session, and I just wanted to bring this up. This is not in the EOA document itself, but kind of provides that background as to why we want to.
Can it be added?
We could add it, but
For the purpose of furthering the argument that the council is looking to provide a healthy, vital community. And not like you added into right this second, but that's part of Goal 9, that we're supposed to be creating that vital, stable community, right?
Yeah, I think we can consider adding it or leave it up to them. I think at this point we have an EOA that has a lot of really good analysis. This chart that you're seeing here is being done by our economist consultant, Jerry Johnson. This is part of a little bit larger study that we're having him doing just to provide support to City Council in terms of our policy. And so it's not complete yet. I think that'd be the hesitation, but we can see if that can be wrapped up and then see if council wants to add it. That'd probably be a conversation with council.
Have it as a placeholder, because I have another question.
Sure, yeah.
When we get to it, but if we're not adding policies to the comprehensive plan as a result of this exercise, when is the EOA document that we would point to when a developer comes in for a zone change or when an annexation occurs? If we're not incorporating it into the comprehensive plan, we're creating a standalone document that didn't feed into what our source document is for other decision making. And if it can be a standalone document that is being referenced in these things, this provides additional testimony with facts for the council decision to help strengthen our job base.
So this document will be it'll be a part of our last EOA, and it will be included as an appendices to our comprehensive plan. The policies within our comprehensive plan right now really speak to diversifying the city's tax base and seeking higher employment jobs to housing already. Taking a review of the goals and policies in the comp plan, this document fully supports all the goals and policies that we currently have in our comprehensive plan.
Yeah, and I just double down on that. So this document would be able to be referenced in a potential zone change.
Yes.
I think what Erica was saying earlier tonight, was the actual policies in the comp plan don't need to be changed as a result of this. But this EOA will be part of the comp plan and can be referenced.
Okay.
Yep.
So just to be clear, this is not part of this argument tonight then for housing needs? And when I read this, it's, I mean, if the argument tonight is we're forwarding this document of housing needs analysis, how does this speak to the needs, not housing needs, economic opportunities? I'm on the wrong thing. Economic opportunities analysis is what we're talking about. But if this doesn't speak to the economic opportunities analysis, like the need for more land, what is it doing to support? Because when I look at this, it's kind of like, this is showing me, okay, more employment to workforce means higher property taxes. That's an argument for more employment, we get more taxes. Not, we have opportunity economically, necessarily. So, I don't know.
Say that again.
So I'm looking at this not as this is an argument for what is recommended in this document, which is we have a need for more development of these various property types. When I see this, it doesn't necessarily argue that. It just shows that more employment equals more property taxes.
Per capita that creates a stronger city budget.
For city services over time.
So this,
Okay.
Okay. So the per capita number that you're reflecting here means that for the residents that live here in Milwaukee, because they have a 1 to 3 or 1.35 ratio on employment, people that live there have the opportunity for their city budget to be more robust because per resident, more property taxes are paid in to the city coffers to support the residents that live there. Is that?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yep. It's a little I had questions on this. It's a little counterintuitive, but yeah, it's an indication of level of service of government.
Right. It's a little confusing because it reads like maybe someone's paying more in property
Yeah,
taxes.
exactly.
And they're not paying more in taxes, they're getting more benefit per capita
Yes.
from the tax base that is
Generated.
within the city limits.
And I think how to see this and how staff is seeing this, and I think how council will likely view it as well, is support. It's evidence and support of the policies that we have in the comprehensive plan. It's actual evidence of if we add more jobs to the city, we will, based on this data and other examples around the region, we will be able to provide more services per head in the city, per capita in
And
the
that
city.
provides economic opportunity. That's it.
Good.
Higher quality,
Yes, higher quality of life.
higher quality of life, library resources, police resources, school resources, which all lead to economic opportunity, yeah.
Thank you.
A more desirable place for employers to come because the resources are here.
So the projected jobs to housing ratio balance here in Sherwood, we have, so our employment growth is anticipated at a higher rate than population to households, and we expect that Sherwood will transition away from a bedroom community sometime between 2035 and 2042, given our employment projections.
Is that looking at, so the entire economic analysis dealt with city limits, Brookman, and the Tonquin employment area. When you make this statement between 2035 and 2042, are you rolling in Sherwood West?
It does not include Sherwood West at this time.
So when you say that we're going to grow that many jobs, you're saying that many jobs are going to be developed in Tonquin employment area, and it's not going to be offset by the increases in the housing in the Brookman area.
Correct. If we were using this current city boundary.
Okay. And that's not changing any zoning, it's just
Not-
reality, but we're short acres, so how does that? Okay, so on to the next.
Well, it actually brings up a question I had. The definition of Sherwood UGB for this report, is that the current city limits, or is that UG 5 years out, 20 years out? Sherwood UGB? What's the property we're talking about?
So that is the current city boundary, the Tonkin employment area, and Brookman
Plus
are
those
growth
two,
areas.
Just those two?
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
And there's land in those two areas to accommodate the growth that's projected in this E EOA.
So our target industries, they've remained the same from our last EOA. We are really focusing on the technology and advanced manufacturing sectors, and clean tech. What that would, means is, manufacturing of, parts, computer parts, electronic parts. Go for it, Bruce. You want to chime in?
So it's really a number of things. I'm sorry, I'm Bruce Coleman, Economic Development Manager for the city. So we actually have a list larger than this. We're looking for semiconductor, and that'll grow in the future. It's already grown pretty substantially here in the last 2 years, actually. Clean tech can be related to e-mobility. Sometimes it's called climate tech. We tend to call it clean tech here. There are a number of companies in the area that are in the business of creating renewable energy, battery storage, that kind of thing. There's some companies in Wilsonville and Tualatin that are doing that now. We also include aerospace and automation and robotics. I think are logical industries here. We have a company right now that's doing SpaceX work here in town, which generally that's not thought of. We're thought of as a bedroom community in this region. So it's a whole list of target industries that really are starting to make sense, and we're starting to prove it, I think, to ourselves and to the market, that Sherwood is a good place for these kinds of higher technology, sophisticated, advanced manufacturing companies.
Quick question. And maybe it's neither here nor there, but when you kind of drill down to your targeted industries, do you look beyond the boundaries of Sherwood to balance? I mean, only so many places in a relatively small geographic area can, carry clean tech, theoretically, right? So did you kind of do that sort of analysis, or is it just solely looking at Sherwood and what we want?
No, it's looking at what's feasible in the greater Portland market, and even going a little bit beyond what's feasible. We just met yesterday with bioscience industry representative. Bioscience is really hard in greater Portland, but we're looking at really all kinds of industries that are sophisticated, growing industries over time that could make sense. And so we started off with a list that a group called Greater Portland, Inc. uses. Greater Portland, Inc. is the regional's marketing entity. And they always tease me a little bit because our list is a lot longer than their list, but I always tell them I don't have money to go to Vancouver, BC, or to go to trade shows in Tokyo. So their list has to be more refined than ours. But I think we're pretty agnostic in the sense that we are focused on all kinds of advanced manufacturing industries that are cleaner industries that really do make sense and that have a hard time, frankly, growing in Portland because of the greater Portland, because of the lack of land. And Sherwood's getting recognized as a place that is very, very focused on this kind of growth. I don't know if that answered your question or not. Okay.
All right.
Before we move on, there's one question I have on the targeted industries. Top of page 19, it says, while not representing an industry-specific target, attracting new marginal employment-related development will be necessary to improve, etc. What's marginal employment?
The way I read that is it's really trying to develop in this community and make this community attractive to additional employment. And maybe the word marginal is a little bit hard to understand, but additional employment that's going to really create a stronger jobs housing balance to help, frankly, with not only job creation of the community, but the revenue base for the city, increasing the revenue base for the city.
So I think we should,
That's really the intent of that statement.
I think the word is not defining something well. It's not creating doesn't create anything in my mind that explains what we're focused on.
We can make that change.
Yes. All right, so moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit about our forecast of employment and land needs. The employment forecast is really how fast we assume Sherwood is going to grow jobs. And the land forecast is how many acres are needed to accommodate future growth. And we look at that, like I said earlier in the presentation, both in the short term, which is 5 years, and the long term, which is the 20-year planning horizon. And then I'm going to also discuss about some of the refinements that we did to the city's buildable lands inventory. So first, we refined and we reviewed and looked at our employment forecast for Sherwood. And we took a look at 3 scenarios, which I have on this slide. First, we have the safe harbor forecast, and that forecast used the Oregon economic forecast growth rate of 2%. And the safe harbor forecast is one that can be used, and it can't be challenged. it's the safe approach. And then we looked at the Sherwood trend forecast, which is how Sherwood grew historically over the past 10 years, and we grew at a rate of 3.4%. And then we took a look at an adjusted employment forecast. So the adjusted employment forecast is based on trends. It's a little bit more optimistic than the safe harbor for targeted jobs. And the adjusted employment forecast also received input from our CAC. And we decided to move forward using that adjustment employment forecast for the rest of the analysis. So in this updated EOA, we are using the 3.2 average annual growth rate for employment, which over the forecast period of 20 years, we are looking at an increase of 8,280 jobs. So using that adjusted forecast, we take a look at the employment land needs. So this is kind of a breakdown of what we did in the methodology to get to the employment of land needs for building types. So we allocated the employment numbers by sectors into building typologies, and then we converted the employment into space using estimates of the typical square footage of building types. And then we finally considered the characteristics of the building types and the amount of land that they require for development. And the common metric that we use here is the floor area ratio standard. And then that demand for space is converted into net acres that is needed for each development form.
So I think I want to, when you say net acres, and I think they're used, the term net acres is used interchangeably in 2 different scenarios. Net meaning gross acres including wetlands, and we net out constrained lands, and then we have net lands. But in most of our other planning, when we talk about net acres, we're talking buildable acres net of public improvements. And because that's a 30% takedown or reduction or whatever, when you say net here, are you discussing net?
Net or net net?
Net or net net or triple net, which would be
net. So this is looking at the net buildable acres for that building type, for the
Without,
building typology. So without any constraints.
without public improvements.
Without public improvements.
So when
Correct.
your statement is that, reading ahead as I did, the 20-year forecast says we need 485. That's net acres. So if we were to only bring in 485 acres, we'd be short. We should bring in 693 acres to have grossed up land available to do public improvements. Is that a true statement?
That's a true statement.
So, as we go through this process, are we comfortable using netted down numbers and understanding how that is utilized, or can we? I don't know. I'm putting it out there because that's such a big number. I mean, we're talking the difference between 485 acres and 693 if we use the difference between net and gross
And
unconstrained lands. And I saw a little asterisk on one of the things that you put in there, but I don't know if someone reading the document is going to have a comprehension. I'd like to, I don't know if there's another word besides net acre, because net acre to me is exactly what you're using it for, net of public improvements. But later on, we use net in the chart that is net unconstrained lands. So we're using apples and oranges in the same analysis. And I don't know if I have an answer, but I think we're creating an opportunity for confusion, misconstrued. Don't know.
I don't know. I know that we had this conversation at our last work session, and I did, put in an asterisk in there trying to delineate what net acres are and how we're using it. So this would be sorry. Oh, okay. Then it would be post, because we're just looking at the land acreage that is needed for that building type. For the building itself.
Yeah. Okay.
What page is that are we on here with the asterisk and the
Hold on, 27.
27 of the EOA?
So we're saying we need three definitions of acreage, right? That's what we need to get to.
Well, and where's the net acres? Oh, net acreage is used. Does not include right of ways.
And so I think, we'll want to clarify, like, if net acreage is used differently within the same report, we should probably clarify that, right? And really, I think how this is going to be used is, it's our own policy document from a city. When we think about urban growth boundary expansions and Sherwood West and how this comes into play there, I think the document, even through this, once we clarify it, it's going to be clear that we're talking about net acreage here without right-of-way, environmental constraints, et cetera. So I think that's clear in this report. And if there's another net in this report, we can clarify what that is or change the.
On page 36,
change it on
we have
36.
net developable acres.
So I think it would be good to clarify that in terms of, a potential UGB expansion and exactly how much we need. Metro is going to do their own analysis on sort of region-wide, how much employment land is needed. And if there is a regional need, Sherwood would likely be up first as we're doing the concept planning, and we also have this need here. But I think we would go back to this document as well and say, yes, we have this, this actual need, and it's clear in the document that it's net. So, I think we clarified in the report, just for future decision makings kind of at all levels, local level and also regional level.
I think it's in the reconciliation where we're spreading the net developable acres, and I don't know if that's I assumed based on this context it was net of constrained land is how I read it.
So in the BLI, we do take out certain constraints. But those are typically, the natural features.
So on page 36, it's really just talking about the sum, the total, right? That's the total acres within each category. Means the sum. So we can change that language to just total developable acres.
Yeah.
And then net. But I think it's important. I think the key thing here is that when we are actually talking about, exactly how much land do we need, gross, that it's not the number that's on page 27. I think, the other thing is we'll probably have to chat with, maybe with DLCD, Metro, and just make sure that we're being consistent. Because if their analysis assumes net as well, then we're all kind of on the same page, right? But I think as long as with this asterisk, we're clear that we're not talking about gross, we're talking about net, and it doesn't include certain things. I think that's most important. We can reconcile that in the future with any type of other decisions that are being made. Particularly the regional growth report.
And when we're using net in the other part, if it's not a true net, we'll change it to total.
Total, yeah. I think it works.
Total, so that we're clear. Thank you, sorry.
Then, looking at the demand analysis side, we looked at the.
Sorry, can you go back to the last slide? I derailed it, so we were using the scenario to get floor area ratio. Sorry.
Yep.
I wanted to get back to the thread that we were on before I derailed it. Sorry.
And then we allocated the employment growth into the standard building typologies. So in this slide, we see that we're going to see more buildings in our general industrial at 24% and office at 25%. So we're going to see growth in those employment numbers. And that's followed by, retail, warehouse and distribution, and institutional.
So, keep just distribution of employment by space. So, 8,280 jobs is a 3.2% increase.
Yes. So.
And so you're increasing wholesale trade by 6%, 6.6%, increasing construction by 4.6%. That's what these represent as an increase over the existing jobs?
Correct, over the 20-year horizon. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that led into this is some assumptions around vacancies. Can you speak to those a little bit? You picked a 10% vacancy rate for office, retail, flex uses. 5% for general industrial warehouse. Why those assumptions? Why not 15%, 5%, 4%? What made you arrive at this one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so our consultant, Jerry Johnson, our economist, he kind of really picked those numbers on kind of what we're seeing like in the region and what kind of the trends are over time.
They're saying only 10% vacancy in office in the region? Seems like vacancies are higher on office.
Downtown, you have like a 27% vacancy.
Yeah, time period.
But what's happening in some of the suburban areas, like Oswego, you're getting downtown offices, urban offices moving. Lots of folks are moving to Cruz Way. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, you probably didn't hear any of that. So I think some of it may be skewed a little bit because you'll have like a 27% or higher vacancy rate in the city center in Portland and the CBD, but in places like Lake Oswego and Cruz Lane, they're seeing a tremendous amount of growth in that in terms of office development. So what office development has occurred is really what office use has occurred is really going to the suburbs by and large. And then the industrial is actually the lowest.
Yeah.
The industrial vacancy rates are scary low.
Yeah, that one I wouldn't.
They're
I wouldn't
scary
challenge.
low. They're a little over
Yes.
2.5%, and that's
Yeah.
not healthy. Healthy is 5% and 6% and that kind of thing. It is very hard to find industrial space, and some of it's leaving the region. Some of the companies are leaving the
Office
region.
particularly struck me as odd. I think. Thank you for that explanation. I heard where you're going. It's kind of a longer term.
Yeah, we are
it's
looking,
longer
and
look
nobody
back.
knows. I'm sorry.
Those rates are all based on what, up to 2019?
I don't know. I mean, those are the rates that the economist is recommending that we use in this analysis, but I think they're looking out a period of time.
Yeah, it's
in
supposed to be
essence,
forward-looking.
Not just looking at what happened in the past.
Yeah.
That's how I understood it.
Yeah, office is a giant unknown right now. So
And nobody
you
knows.
understand you got to make an assumption. If what you're saying is true and offices in the suburbs, like us, is better, okay. It's going to be supported it somehow. Okay.
And just remember, we like to keep the EOA updated over time. So this document isn't going to be sitting on a shelf. We like to reevaluate it every couple of years. So I would, expect over the next 3 to 4 years that we'll take another look
Yep.
at this document again.
See where office is going by then a little bit.
And I think in terms of office, I think the other thing to consider is that no investor is going to build office in this market at this stage. Now, there could be office as part of industrial that fits into industrial in a lot of cases, but no one is going to come and build. So that's going to, over time, I think the idea is that's going to reduce the vacancy rate for office, with the exception of what's going on in the city center in Portland, because that's, who knows what's going to happen there. But I think in terms of the suburban areas, nobody's going to build office at this
So
stage.
your last slide has 25% of the employment growth in office, though.
Just, yes, but also remember some of that office space can land in the general industrial.
Okay. Okay. Right.
So a question that sort of ties into the office stuff, the work from home movement. How do we factor that into? I don't think I saw anything in the EOA on that, but is there something we can leverage there? Because it seems like an opportunity for somebody who's worked from home for 20 years, eating out in local restaurants and stuff like that. So is that addressed anywhere, or is that something to be considered?
I don't think that's not addressed right now in this current update, just because we don't have.
Too new.
We don't have like the trends per se for COVID and kind of the implications of people working from home, the greater number of people working from home. I think in our next update, those trends will be
All right,
becoming
thanks.
more and more
I think there are just too many unknowns at this stage. There's not a long enough history of seeing that. I mean, there's certainly some folks who are saying the center cities are going to just die. There'll be no offices. There'll be no restaurants to be. I mean, we hope that's not going to be the case, but only time is going to tell if that's in fact the case, not just in Greater Portland, but in most of the American metro
nationally,
areas.
Yeah, I mean, they're even just watching CBS that universe, there's a lot of maturities coming up in the next year or two that maybe see what happens there. There's not even a lot of pricing out there right now. Yep.
Can we add that as a item in our strategy under number 5? It says employment growth, improvements to infrastructure, changes in market trends, site readiness, I would say, and remote changes in remote worker trends or whatever. That way at least there's a pin in it so we can
In-office trends, I think, would be more specific to our
in-office
needs.
trends. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm writing this down.
And maybe also if you could speak to the FAR assumptions a little bit at the floor area, if you know any more detail about it. Came up a little bit earlier, but how those floor area ratios determined.
Yeah, so that was determined based on the average square feet of these types of buildings and the lot acreage that they're on. So that'll give us, a population of how many employees could be employed in that area.
I mean,
It's just the average, taking a look at the average within the region for those types of buildings and what land is needed for those types, what parcel sizes.
Parcel sizes, okay.
and industry standards, I guess, by development type. So I'm always, when I'm talking to engineers and architects, doing plan review, they know exactly what their target is for a site. I mean, if it's unusually constrained, they say, all right, we got to drop it down a little bit. But if you got a flat site and it's an industrial use, this is what you're going for.
These assumptions, the source of them is from your conversations with developers then?
No, it's from our economists
I see.
based on industry standards. And I imagine he's,
Okay.
to be completely frank with you, he's probably got this, he does a lot of EOAs. He's probably got this locked in from past EOAs and he's carrying it over based on our region. So
I see.
he's probably got it locked in and he might make small fluctuations over time, but probably very commonly accepted floor area ratios by land use type.
It's not a publication like the TIA or something like that.
Probably not. I'd say industry standard, very well-known industry standard, would probably be the best answer.
I mean, it'd be nice to have some of those assumptions, whatever our consultant has done. I mean, if we have to own the analysis and report he does, we should have some of what's behind the curtain that he uses documented for us. And that goes back to some of the issues I've raised with understanding the models they're using. I mean, we should see the formulas and coefficients and everything at this point. I mean, we should understand them. We're going to own this forecast.
Yeah.
And it's a big forecast, so not having some of that, so we used, back in the day, you could get away with just using models more, and these days, if you're going to own the results, you should know and understand completely how those models are developed. Black boxes, I think, are not as good any longer, especially for this kind of stuff. So we should put that in whenever we work with a consultant. All right, you're going to be expected to deliver your behind the scenes. You can't, that kind of stuff too.
And I think, I don't know if Jerry's still in Europe or not. I mean, ideally we'd have him here. I think he'd have pretty satisfactory answers for you if he were here. I think we haven't been involved in sort of all the sausage making of the report, more as project management given the city policies.
Can it be added as an appendices?
That's what it would be. Yeah.
Before it goes to council so that they can see it? Because I think, like you said, for owning it, but also when we look at it in 3 to 5 years to recreate it, if someone looks at it and says there's a fail point and we don't know where the number came from, it's a really bad place to be versus the fail point was generated by numbers that changed because COVID information hadn't been factored into the calculations, and we can see that in Appendix C or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would add is on our CAC, we had multiple, developers, land use brokers. I mean, we had very seasoned staff from McKinsey Architecture who, this is what they do all day, is lay out these sites and figure out the floor area ratio for specific sites. And we didn't have any concerns. So I think part of this is vetted through the process and sort of the experts that we have on, sort of watching this. I don't think we got any comments or concerns from the people who are really in the weeds on this specific
I mean, not only
issue.
did we have McKinsey, they were NAIOP. I don't know if you know NAIOP, but NAIOP used to be the National Association of Industrial and Office Park Developers, and that's just about every major developer. Well, it's a national association, but every major developer here in Greater Portland is involved in NAIOP, and that was the appointee of NAIOP, McKinsey, to this. And then we had Trammell Crow on this, which has developed some new industrial parks, obviously where Lamb Research went, et cetera, in Sherwood, and they looked at these numbers. We had a commercial broker who's extremely familiar with this market. He was involved. We had Washington County Economic Development on that, and we had an industrial real estate appraiser on this, reviewing this document.
Yeah, and I think that was a pro of this. We had experts on the panel providing what we call in the modeling world effective challenge in assessing the reasonableness. Just speaking from my world in the banking industry, I mean, just pure judgment was not enough in the Great Recession, right? That's why Dodd-Frank was passed. That's why model risk management now exists, because you have to have some objective components that are documented well with good assumptions, and model theory and design needs to be a component of things. So I'm not discounting all that. You're right. And there were good experts on there, and certainly they provided insight. But we should also have documentation of behind the scenes the assumptions provided, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I think we absolutely hear you on transparency, I guess, or where's the data? I think in this particular case with floor area ratio, I think it's there's not a whole lot that goes into it that's sort of dark and scary. I don't think. I think in some of the other modeling that you were pointing out, probably a little bit more so. Probably not in floor area ratio, though. I think
right. I should probably make that clear. I think this was the catalyst for me saying these things. But
yeah.
Really, it's backing up. I think to the forecast earlier. Really is.
Yeah,
where
and I hear you on that. It's like,
that,
where is this coming from? Especially with the OAR, and what was the impetus of all of this? Where did it all start? But I think we hear you. We can sort of reinforce through some type of text. Likely, I think the simplest thing would just be to provide some background on and reinforce, hey, these are actually legit, very close to what you'd see, probably not only in our region, but probably nationally. This is what you'd see in similar markets for floor area ratio.
Sure. Can we expand Appendix A that has the LI methodology to include this data, more footnotes, if you will?
I mean, yeah, I think it's something that we can include either in the text or just as an appendices. I mean, I'm thinking just a paragraph. It's a pretty floor area ratio.
Well, I think we're getting on. It's more than just the floor area ratio. It's the other assumptions that Commissioner Vance was talking about that want to have the underpinnings in an appendice. Do you have a list of those?
Well,
or
yeah, I mean, I kind of missed it earlier because I wasn't sure when to pipe in because I was letting Erica do her presentation.
And then I derailed it, and then
it just sort of came up at the floor area ratio thing. But we can circle back to that if we want.
Or could you put together a quick list of the 3 or 4 points you'd like the consultant to bring back
to address to some degree,
in a separate appendix, so we don't stall out here?
Yep.
All right.
And I like, and just for a good point, Bruce had a really, for me, layman, the effective challenge of a peer review is also somewhat comforting to know that there were in the CAC challenges by people in the industry that know. So that tags along with, if we can get the consultant that provided the information, some of his assumptions or where his source data came from. Sorry, I'm done now. Sorry.
Moving on to the next slide here, we see the net change in employment allocated by building type. And so we know that over the 20-year period, we're going to see our employment grow by, a little over 8,000 people. And we're going to see the most people, again, in, office and general industrial, followed by retail and flex and institutional. So here we are looking at demand, at how many net acres will be needed to support the general uses over the next 20 years. So we see that the commercial, office, and retail densities are at 35.5 and 18.3 jobs per acre, respectively. And so the overall weighted employment density is going to be at 17.1 jobs per acre, with a projected 8,280 job expansion for local employment through 2042. So this is overall, when we look at our land base, the net, getting back to net acres required, is 485. And then when we look at all the different factors that get to the net acres required for each general use, the model is showing that Sherwood will need 143 acres of employment land for the next 5 years in the short-term land analysis. And just taking a step back here to our buildable lands inventory, we did do some refinements to that inventory, and we went back and we actually changed some acreage to constrained. So we actually took out a little bit over 41 acres from our buildable lands inventory from the last go around. And then we see here employment acres by classification and plan designation. And the results show that Sherwood has, a total of 956 acres in commercial and industrial plan designations. And out of the 956 acres within the UGB, about 525 acres, or about 54%, are in classification with no development capacity. And then 233 acres, about 24%, are constrained. And only 208 acres are buildable with development capacity. They're unconstrained. And that's that last column with the 208 unconstrained buildable acres. And then table 5.4 within the EOA document shows the size of lots by plan designations for buildable employment land. And Sherwood has 25 lots that are smaller than 2 acres. We have 36 lots between 2 and 10 acres, and 0 lots between 10 and 50 acres in size. And this is really, I've touched on this before in other previous presentations about the EOA, when we talk about our target industries and who we want to target here in Sherwood, and what types of lots they need and the acreage of those lots. This chart really becomes very useful to us. If we are, targeting, let's just say, a large chip manufacturing plant, they're going to need a large site, more than 50 acres in size. And so we need to be aware, as we look at our buildable lands for employment, what types of lots and acreages we have, so we can attract the development that we're seeking. So this is the short-term land supply. So this is showing the supply of commercial industrial land by plan designation, and the results show that Sherwood has 24 acres of commercial land. On 134 tax lots. In the short-term supply of land is we have 94 acres of industrial land on 125, roughly 125 tax lots.
So this is really confusing to read this because it says we have 90 lots of retail commercial that is 6 acres. So if you just take 6 acres divide by 90 lots, we have 200 square feet per lot or whatever it ends up being. It seems like some of these tax lots are undevelopable or constrained. So we went from total acres to a buildable acres. It seems like we need to reduce from tax lots to only accommodate what are buildable tax lots, because I've noticed it in the staff report when I was looking at this going, there must be a typo in the staff report because it says, well, there's 90, on page 11, it says there's 90 lots and it's 6.5 acres. So I circled it that there was a typo because it can't possibly be 90 lots on 6 acres.
Oh, so we have 90 tax lots.
That are zoned
Yeah, there's
retail commercial.
There's going to be a lot of tax lots in there that, exactly like you said, they're fully developed.
fully
and
developed.
so they have no development capacity. So, yeah, I don't think it's an issue to update this table. We could probably just add a column to say like total tax lots and then tax lots with development capacity, which is going to be a much smaller number, and then buildable acres within those tax lots with capacity.
Or take out the number of tax lots or something, just something so that it doesn't appear that we have,
Yeah, I would probably just take out the tax lots and say in the general commercial plan designations, there's 12.55 buildable acres.
because the previous one shows you, what's the size
What's
of
the
the lots.
size
Like
that we have?
5.4 shows that.
Correct.
But 5.5, having the number of tax lots as if they're all buildable is definitely confusing.
Yeah,
I think it's a
I see
quick,
that. I think
quick
that's a
fix.
great
Yep.
comment.
Thanks
The
for
quick
catching
fix
that.
is take one column out. Don't try and count lots.
We probably have that easily.
If you
accessible.
have the lots that are available,
We probably do.
We do,
yeah.
but the table is going to be significantly larger than
Well-
this little table. I think we should just take out the tax lot.
if you have buildable tax lots to go with buildable acres, that's great.
Yeah, we'll take a look. If we have that easily accessible, we can make
Otherwise,
that
just
change.
take the
Otherwise,
column
we'll just take it
out.
out. Okay.
Yeah, it just came.
What matters is what's buildable anyway, right?
Right,
For the
Correct.
purpose of this,
right,
the less confusion, the better.
right.
Yeah.
So then we reconcile the forecasted need with our capacity, and we have learned that Sherwood has a
What's right
limited
here?
inventory of available sites to accommodate employment uses. So we have an estimated
there's 5.
inventory of 208 net acres of developable land. That was in table 5.2. And then roughly 13% of this land is in commercial zones, while the remainder is in industrial zoning. The available site sizes are generally quite small, which we talked about on this table,
Oh, so
table
just
5.4.
so right there, that gives you the tax lots that are buildable tax lots. So you have 5 buildable tax lots in commercial, 0 in neighborhood commercial, 4 in office commercial. So that number on table 5.5 is relevant. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Piecing it together here. So we know that the available site sizes are generally small with no developable tax lots identified that are greater than 10 acres in size within the Sherwood West boundary and our planning areas. And there is likely some ability to assemble larger sites in the area, but we know that assembling sites with property owners may or may not be challenging.
Mayor?
So we compared the BLI to the 20-year forecast of employment land needs, and that was generated earlier in the analysis. If you take a look at table 4.08, and we see that there is a 36-acre deficit of commercial land and 238 acres for needed industrial land, for a total employment land deficit of 277 acres. So conclusions, over the 20-year planning period, we have a deficit of 277 acres for employment lands, and in the short term, we have a deficit of nearly 24 acres. We need to keep monitoring our sites to ensure that there is sufficient opportunities for small to mid-size business development here in Sherwood, and to make sure that we have those sites that can accommodate those businesses. So we're looking at sites that are, 10 acres or larger. And also, just to bring up, when we touched on this on our work session about the EOA, this forecast, we didn't look at impacts from the Oregon Semiconductor Task Force, which says that there is a current need within the state for 2 sites that are 500 or more acres in size, and 4 sites that are needed that are between 50 to 100 acres in size, and 8 sites of 15 to 35 acres in size. But if the city is interested in pursuing, opportunities for semiconductor businesses, we'll need to add the appropriate sites.
Can you go back one slide, please?
Yes.
This goes back to the net versus
So we'll
gross.
say total developable acres.
Because we are comparing apples and oranges in this slide. The 5-year one's, it's easier to, I don't know if you have that one, but you're taking gross acres and subtracting net acres and coming up with a 277 acre deficit, which in reality could be more, if I'm understanding. If we change it to total developable acres, we're comparing 100% developable acres and subtracting 0.7 demand acres, a factor of 0.7. So if we were to net down our developable acres or gross up the demand acres,
You're going to change that to total, though, instead of net.
Right. But if we take that to be total developable acres, it says we have 208 acres, and if you it might be easier because the rest of the document is talking about floor area ratios and net. So projected 20-year demand of net acres is 485. Our total developable acres is 208 less public improvement leads. We have net developable acres of 60 of 140 acres. Is that a true? I mean, am I going down the wrong way with this, or does
Depends on what they
anybody
mean by net here, I guess.
Based on my reading of it, they were talking about.
Not convinced we have a problem on this slide, actually.
You think the
So net, on that first column, net developable acres
is that net
for
of
the
public
BLI.
improvements?
Did we take, I'm trying to think if that is net or gross.
I believe it has to be net because we take out wetlands, riparian areas,
Public improvements.
Not in the BLI. We would just look at, well, a lot of it's accounted for already. I mean, it's a complicated answer, to be honest, because a lot of these sites that we're saying are available, meaning net developable in each zone, a lot of them are on existing roads, and so it's not like a total new growth area. So the answer's complicated. There's a lot of properties on, I mean, some of this is going to be on Galbraith, for example, where we know there's no deduction for right-of-way. Some of it's in the Tonkin employment area where there likely would be. So
I think what you're getting after, though, is just apples to apples here. Are we saying we have 208 of the 485 we need, of whatever that is? That's kind of what you're
Do we really have 208 or do we have 160? And what Eric is saying is we have someplace in between, because if we look at Galbraith, they are true net acres, and we're close. So, but changing it to say total developable acres is a better
Phrasing.
That would clarify. I think getting into, potentially adding or subtracting to that 208 is a really complicated answer and probably not
yes.
something we want to get into at this point. I think clarification on what we mean for net in each circumstance is probably the most we want to do at this point.
That's better, and in 5 years this won't mean anything and we'll be redoing it, right? I mean, it'll mean something, but it'll be a whole different set of numbers.
Yes.
And we'll
Correct.
be better next time.
Yeah.
But does that change the second column? Does that change the analysis then, I guess, the third
It
column? Because
doesn't.
we're trying to argue that we have 208 of the 485 something we need. I mean, they have to be the same measurement for it to be meaningful.
So if the land were in the Galbraith and the regular Sherwood proper, the answer is pretty darn close to 208 acres. The challenge is that some of that acreage is in Tonquin area, and so if we look at Tonquin, there's however many acres in Tonquin,
Right.
and
Yep.
there will have to be a reduction off that, but we couldn't.
I get that, but is the 485 the same as that? Okay, all right. So that's kind of the total
Yeah,
as well.
if-
Okay, that's all I was getting at.
Yeah, if we're taking the assumption that a large percentage of the BLI lands are already in areas that have the public improvements in place, now we're taking an exception to an exception. I thought it was 100% of what we were looking at was gross acres, and that's a pretty big swing. But if we start saying, well, it's only a subset of that needs that reduction, then it becomes less material.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Bance is actually right, though. The 485 is net. And so I think the way to look at this, it's complicated, but when I think the way we'd look at it is when we see 277, the way we would likely approach this in the future is that is a net demand, and so we need to add more to that. The 208 is a mixed bag. The 485, based on this is what we just mentioned with this asterisk number 2 that says it's net acreage, does not account for right-of-way and utilities. That applies to the 485. And so I think the way to just reconcile, it's not perfect. It's kind of unfortunately, how planning is at times. It's not perfect. There's just a lot of nuance to it. And so I think the key is when we get that final number, 277, and we can confirm this with our economists, I think we already have actually, the 277 is a net demand. And the driving force behind that is when we look at all the typologies and that 485 number, that's clear, it's net. The other one is a mixed bag, and so it's the 485, and that approach kind of outweighs the 208.
So put an asterisk at the bottom of these assumption boxes.
Yeah.
I think we could put it on
So it could be more, but I mean, the whole thing's an estimate anyway. to an
Correct.
extent. So, I mean, it's,
Correct.
I mean, it's mainly just, again, just documenting. Documentation is key. You know, what are the assumptions and, you know, what,
Right, and
How's
so
this
to make
scale that?
to make this figure a little bit more clear, we'll say total developable acres in that first column, net projected 20-year demand acres, and then net for the third column for the 277.
With net asterisk defined at the bottom.
Correct.
yep.
I think that
that's
helps.
okay. I mean, yeah. You
Yep, that's
can,
what
you
we'll
can
do.
over science it, I get it, for an estimate and just document.
6.1 and 6.2.
Yeah, 6.1. All right, so public testimony, agency comments. We send out the EOA to all of our respective agencies. We do not receive any public comments via agencies or comments from the community on this document. I just do want to reemphasize that we did have a technical advisory committee that reviewed this document and the process that we took to get us here tonight. They were really kind of the leaders in that peer review of this document. I do have a couple edits.
You're a leader.
Leader.
Edits to the
Apparently.
staff report and or to the document itself. So Commissioners Barnes and Simpson, they provided some Scrivener errors, nothing of substantive evidence that would refute any of the staff report findings or change the recommendations. And then in the EOA document itself on page 24, it says 700 manufacturing jobs since 2019, and that should be 426 jobs. And Sherwood will have an addition of 184 warehousing jobs. So if you take a look at those numbers, we just want to switch them. And that is because we switched one of the buildings was described as manufacturing when it should be warehousing.
Where?
On page 24.
What is what? Sorry.
The 700 jobs since 2019. I don't see that statement. Oh, it's on page 23.
It's on page 23. I'm sorry, page 23. We're changing the 700 manufacturing jobs to
And
be
it says
426.
since 2021, so it should be since 2019 at the beginning of the paragraph.
Sorry, it might be another typo. When did Sipel Industrial go in?
Typo was about 2020, well, actually almost 2021 by the time it got completed.
Oh, go.
So we say
Yeah,
since
be-
2021.
Be 2021 then. I apologize. 2021 then. So since 2021, and then those two.
You go
and then
backwards.
Those corrections.
400 should be 426 manufacturing jobs. Still not getting. Still don't know what you're talking about, but
It's on page 23.
Yeah, page
since
23.
2021, the city has added approximately 700, which is now 426 new manufacturing jobs.
Yep.
The estimated 700 jobs are based on, so it's 426 a second time or a third time? So 700 is listed 3 times in that paragraph. Should it all be 426?
Yes, it should all be 426. So the change is
Far
one of the,
exceeds the,
yeah, the TS Corporate Park, which has been almost fully leased. The 700 is based on 100% of that site being manufacturing, but one of the large sites is actually warehousing, and so that was a correction that we made. So when we change that large building from manufacturing to warehousing, the manufacturing jobs get reduced to 426, and we add 184 warehousing jobs. But I think the important piece is that safe harbor model had us at 173 jobs over the 20-year planning horizon. We know just based in one tenant space,
We're gonna exceed that.
300 jobs. And so
Yep.
we're just trying to make
Yep.
a point that the safe harbor forecast is already incorrect.
Another reason not to use a safe harbor forecast.
Right.
Yes.
So just to be clear on this EOA statement, the 2019 is wrong here. It's 2021.
Correct. It should be
We're sticking- okay,
2021.
all right.
Sorry, a typo in our typo correction.
And then page 38.
And then on page 38, I think it's strategy number 5. We just want to strike out.
7.
Thank you.
7.
That we just want to strike out where it says Sherwood West Technology and Innovation Park Site to just overall the Sherwood West area. And that's primarily because we haven't gone through the public process yet with Sherwood West, and we just want to be clear and transparent about what could and could not be.
That's
that
something you
area.
asked for last time when we had the work session.
And then did anybody bring up, or maybe it was just my packet, but on page 4, I think it was, I only had like half a graph to print out.
Yeah, I didn't have that.
Was that way electronically and? Yeah, you got the same thing?
Oh, look at that. Oh, there were so many.
Figure 2.02 for some reason didn't print out properly.
Page 4, the document.
Economic opportunities analysis.
So many pretty colors. I missed that.
Figure 2.02.
It must
I
have
was
been.
reading it, and I'm like, hold on a second.
Must have been when I fell asleep reading
Well,
it.
it's funny how we all just say different things.
Reading different charts. Yeah.
Did you find that, Erica?
Oh, it is the chart. I don't know why that happened. I'll take a look at that PDF.
Page
It always
30.
does. What was that?
Sorry.
Nothing, just comment for the chair.
Did you change any of the other strategies that are in? Obviously,
Yes.
numbers.
So based on our work session
No,
converse,
I mean, in general, are these economic development strategies the same that were in? Or did these just get typed up for this presentation? Are these all brand new, or are they
these are all brand new strategies
for this?
for this document.
And that the previous strategies in the last EOA were removed completely?
So we didn't have strategies in the last EOA. We just had comp plan goals and policies. We didn't have action items.
Okay, I remember now.
We're getting to an action item plan for
That
all
was
of our goals
the
and policies.
COVID
in the
time
plan.
and all the changes that were taking place at that time. Got it. Thank you. And I thought we had talked about on 23, on page 42, including other areas other than just San Francisco and the Bay Area.
Was that on page 42?
Yeah,
Yes.
42. talks about reach out to industrial brokers in the Bay Area and other markets. The Bay Area is probably the logical market for us. We can't, one person. We can't do Los Angeles and San Diego and other markets, but the Bay Area is definitely a logical market because of the cost of doing business in the Bay Area.
Okay, I just had a note that we had mentioned other areas, but it doesn't matter. It says other markets. Anybody else have any other questions?
I have a super quick little note that I just wanted to point out on page 4. There's a double negative in the second paragraph.
Page 4 of the staff report.
Sorry, staff report, yes. Where it says no new or revised comprehensive goals and policies.
Yes, that's been caught.
That has been, okay.
Yes,
Very good.
we'll fix that.
Pass the test. Check. And then I had just a big general question. The staff report spends pages 5 through 12 talking about goal 9, which is obviously the economic development. But it says a principle determined in planning for major industrial and commercial developments should be the competitive advantage of the region within which the developments would be located. It's on staff report, page 5. Are we required, because it says that in there, and I don't know if that is language from ORS or just, I'm just trying to determine, if it's from the ORS that we have to answer the competitive advantage of the region, did we answer that when we were doing this, or is that just a statement from staff? That I'm on page 5 of the staff report. So we are trying to, pro or con, whether we like the EOA or not, we have to comply with the development code criteria, which is the text amendment is a needs, that it's consistent with our comprehensive plan, that we meet the statewide planning goals, and goal 9 is economic development, which I haven't read goal 9 in its entirety to know how many pages it goes on, but it just has one sentence that says objective to provide adequate opportunities throughout the state for a variety of economic activities vital to the health, welfare, and prosperity of Oregon citizens. Is that the only criteria that we have to look at, that one sentence? Because in the response it goes
Yes.
on to,
So that's the objective of goal 9, but then there are Oregon administrative rules that we have to look at, and that's kind of the implementation of goal 9 and the instructions that we have to follow for
Right.
the EOA analysis itself.
And so in those administrative rules, does it say that there's an analysis of the community's economic patterns, potentialities, strengths, and deficiencies? Fine, I think we've got that. And a principal determinant in planning for major industrial developments would be the competitive advantage of the region within development is located. It's called out in our response, but I don't see that we answered the question of how we are competitively advantaged. Or is it?
Well,
I think when,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
I think
Bruce.
that when we look at the target industries that make sense
Yes.
here, we know for the semiconductor, when the 2 U.S. senators and others set up the semiconductor industry competitiveness task force for Oregon, what they basically said is semiconductors are only going to go into the metro area. They're not going to, they don't say this, they're not going to go into Bend, or not into Bend, but into Burns, for example, or Umatilla County or whatever. They need a certain job talent base that focuses on a metropolitan area. So the target list that we've developed, I think, does in fact intend to look at the competitive advantage, and we did that basically in conjunction looking at there's a document that both Metro and Greater Portland Inc. have called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, which looks at the target industries that make sense for Greater Portland, in particular the X number of counties that define Greater Portland, including Clark County. And so we look at that, and when we look at the competitive advantage, in a sense, because that kind of a document looks at the competitive advantage when it selects the types of target industries. So I sort of feel that just by having the kind of industries that we're talking about, we have, in a sense, looked at those, the competitive advantage of this.
So I was just looking at our response and our findings,
okay.
the actual, if it's in our document, summarized, because we go on for, like I said, pages 5 through 12. We have a statement on our response that says we should do this, and we didn't respond to ourselves saying, and by using these targeted industries, we have demonstrated this through our target. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a 2, 4, 6, 7-page response, and the finding is we meet the intent of goal 9. But
We can add a sentence in there about how our targeted industries meet the competitive advantage of the region.
yeah, I'm just used to the staff report in the response and findings. I guess I got lost in all the pages of adding the charts back in there, but not actually a executive summary in a couple of sentences that says we met goal 9 by demonstrating these 3 bulleted points. And in that same thing, we did have 3 bulleted points, but I'll show you afterwards. It just, the way it's written is wrong in my, because we have the 3 employment on page 6. The proposed EOA updates the following, and then it numbered 1, 2, and 3. And then the next sentence is a hanging sentence that probably should be the first sentence underneath the employment forecast. Does that make sense? So employment forecast is number 1. We move that sentence down, number it number 1, employment forecast, number 2, employment land demand, and then then that's where we got a lot of charts. And then did we go to number 3?
Page 8 is number 3.
Page 3.
Yeah, right underneath the chart.
Oh, there it is. Page 3 goes into it. So I'm just thinking about who our audience is. Who is our audience in the staff report? Is it the council, where they're going to read the economic opportunities analysis? I felt like I was reading it twice, in the staff report and then again in the opportunities analysis. So I would have, I don't know. I just thought a executive summary in the staff report, kind of how we've done the other responses and findings.
Yeah, I mean, it is a long response, several pages. Usually, when we see other applications, you kind of summarize the information that was provided by the applicant elsewhere in an application or something, and then kind of just state whether or not the criteria was met. This appears to be kind of really restating, like you said, a lot of the application criteria, which is the economic opportunities analysis itself.
Right, and I did that just because it's the refinement to the 2021 document, and I thought that was important to the findings, that these are the things that we were looking at and changing.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So where we changed net and buildable in the main EOA, we'll probably want to make sure that gets changed in the staff's response section.
Yes. We will update those tables.
question is, are we comfortable with, or is there any other questions about changes, edits, adds, deletions?
Got all mine. Then the question becomes, are we comfortable making a recommendation to City Council
Or do we,
with tonight's edits and corrections?
or do we want it to come back, review it one more time?
That's really for the commission to consider before I make a motion.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a one-man decision-making person.
Was there, I guess I'd ask staff, was there enough detailed direction in the information that we provided to be able to take our conversation tonight and create a final document that goes to council from that?
Yes, I think so.
And then as members, not members of the commission, we're members of the community, I wouldn't recommend that you always go testify to city council, but if you see the staff report before it goes to the actual hearing and there's a miss in there, you can say, you know, that's not what the commission discussed, you know, call Erica and say, hey, you know, I think this was a misunderstanding, and she can, and then we have Counselor Stankey that's going to be representing us at the city council, so he will have heard our deliberation this evening, and if there, you know, is a disconnect between the conversation tonight and the final staff report, he'll be there as our advocate. Okay, all right.
Can you, I don't want to belabor everything, can you give us, if you've written down kind of what that stuff is, can you just summarize it, some of the changes we're expecting to see post our approval, or recommendation rather? There's a lot of stuff talked about tonight.
Yeah.
Trying to remember what all is going to go into this.
So
The edits.
we are looking at a couple paragraphs for the methodology for the land employment forecast. And then we had a couple changes on the tables to differentiate between total developable acres and net acres.
Yep.
So we're gonna make those changes. A couple, like smaller things that I've noted here in my notes. Change the word marginal on page 19. I think the two major or two bigger issues was just the like adding the appendix language for that methodology and making separate the tables between net buildable acres.
And there was something on the finding too, kind of clarifying that, or not the finding.
Yes,
what we
so
the
we're gonna keep that,
response,
we're gonna
yeah.
keep that finding, but we're just going to,
Add a clarifier.
yes.
And so the methodology things, the FAR, just comment, I don't know that you need two whole paragraphs if it's as straightforward as you're saying, but then I'll give you maybe a couple bullet points, at least ask for some of the other methodology stuff. Okay.
I think there was also a change in the strategies, which we intend to take out the reference to the Sherwood West Technology Innovation Park.
All right. Yeah.
And so you're going to email staff from the TAC perspective of a couple of the modeling.
Yeah. Some ideas on additional documentation if it's available. That's kind of it. But I'll try to keep it, you know, concise. I think for me this was kind of a learning experience going through this process, and I didn't want to totally cause a recreation of how everything's done. I knew that going in. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna observe a lot of this. So yeah, I mean, I have some things that I've learned in the process that I think we should build upon probably in the future and next rounds, rather than try to collapse something here. You know, certainly don't want to do that. I think there was a lot of goods in this process. I don't want to understate that. I mean, having been through all those meetings, there was a lot of good stuff. Like you said, there was a lot of great folks on there, really know the market. I thought the supply analysis is done really well. I'm glad we did our own forecast and not the safe harbor, even though it's safe, because I think it was needed. There was a lot of goods in here, but there's always room, I think, for improvement down the road, and that's kind of where I'm coming from on some of this.
Thank you.
That's it for me.
Any other deliberation?
No. I'm ready for a question if we're in agreement that we can.
I'd like to move the Sherwood Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for Economic Opportunities Analysis Update, LU 2023-007, based on the applicant testimony, public testimony received, and the analysis findings and conditions in the staff report with the following modifications. Scrivener errors from the commissioners, as described earlier, as well as all the updates as provided by the commission this evening.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we forward a recommendation of approval with modifications on LU 2023-007 PA Economic Opportunities Analysis Update. Before we take a vote, I did want for record to note that there are no citizens in the audience, which is why we did not call for proponents or opponents, and rebuttal testimony not being necessary at that time. So, having said that, we are closing our public testimony and going in for a vote. Is there any further deliberation on the motion on the floor? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, any commissioner comments?
I got two.
All right.
Number one, I will miss the joint workstation or work session next week. I'll be traveling for business. Number two, don't forget to vote. We've got a special election coming out. No one ever shows up for those. We've got important stuff on the ballot, so vote by next Tuesday.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? And we are adjourned.